I was very happy for it to be a one-man band until I got to that point where I realised that there's almost blue sky here, or blue ocean, if you like, in terms of the ability to scale this if I got it right.
So you mentioned there was something off about the pricing. What was kind of the original pricing model?
I could prove to people that, you set me a target price here after I analyse the property, and I'll take a percentage of the savings that I make you below the target price you set. Only problem with that, as I got sort of 9 months to a year into it, I'm promoting all the savings that I make, and then everyone new that comes in just lowers their target price because they don't want to pay any money.
Is there any like kind of mistakes or learnings that you've taken away from any of the bigger agreements that you've done?
I think there's probably a lot of learnings in each of those transactions that are different to each other. The ones that would overarch all of those transactions is...
Welcome to the Level Me podcast, where we rise to the level of those around us. And today we have Scott Aggett from Hello Haus. Scotty, welcome.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited, mate. You and I have become very close friends over the last little while, and you've got a pretty cool business story, so I'm keen to break it down.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to get into it. I mean, a fair few of the nuts and bolts of it already, but we can unpack it together.
Well, that's why I wanted to have you on, mate. I've got to share it with everyone.
Sure.
So Hello Haus is pretty cool because, the buyer's agent industry has really grown over the last 3-4 years, probably 6 in Australia. It's big overseas and not as big here, but it's growing really crazily. And what I love about any business that kind of niches within a niche is just what you guys do and how you market and how you target something different. So essentially what you guys do is really focus on just the negotiation piece rather than the full search, due diligence, whole buyer's agents process from start to finish, right? What was the ultimate decision when you started the business to kind of just focus on the negotiation piece?
Mate, it was born out of being an agent and a frustrated real estate agent and watching the rise of buyer's agents in Sydney that I was selling properties to. And you'd see the buyers on a weekly basis that were turning up frustrated. They'd be with you for months looking for properties. They couldn't find anything independently themselves. And then you'd see them rock up with a buyer's agent and then they'd transact really quickly. And often what I saw is they'd pay a premium with a cherry on top for that luxury. And I thought there's got to be a smarter way than this. They're outsourcing to what they believe is the solution. However, they're effectively just, transacting really quickly. It's very transactional from a buyer's agent's perspective. And they're paying a premium for that service as not only in the fee, but also in the extended, outlay on the purchase price. So I thought there's got to be a better way for this. And I looked at it and broke it down to look at what the two kind of main things that I thought were the problem for the buyer. And it's really understanding the right price to pay, and then controlling the negotiation. They're the two independent career skills that really move the needle. So I thought there's an opportunity to do something in that space.
I know you do help with some of the search process and stuff like that as well,
Yep.
But also if you're working with an owner occupier, generally they'll have a property that they love, that they've seen, that they want to come and check it out and just need the help on that negotiation piece. What percent do you work with investors as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And so what percentage would it be like owner occupier versus investors?
75 owner occupier, 25 investors,
Okay.
and 20% of our customers bring the property to us.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So 1 in 5 turn up and say, I want to buy 12 Smith Street, let's go. We do all the due diligence, the analysis, and then control the negotiation start to finish.
Okay.
But otherwise, 80% of our customers engage us at the start of that process, whether they've been looking for 30, 60, 90, 180 days, whatever it might be or not. We start with strategy and then work through a pre and off market system that we deploy, which we've built AI around. So we've got proprietary tech in that space. And then from there, we control the analysis and due diligence once they shortlist properties for us. And that's really the difference in our model, is that we're not out there actively sourcing the property, and we don't physically inspect any of these properties, and we don't physically meet any of our clients. It's all done remotely. And that was a decision that I made to build from the start.
Yeah. So what year did you start?
It's 6 years old this month.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 2018. Yeah. So that would have been pre-COVID.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that would have helped with the business going through COVID because everything had to move online, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it was a one-man band for the first 4 years. So it was very nimble. It was very much born out of my experience and being burnt as a real estate agent. I'd just done that for 23 years. I was tired. I was exhausted. We moved to the Gold Coast. At that point, my dad was dying and unfortunately passed away, this month, right before kind of that stage. A year before that, I should say. And I was, caught up in that with family, and that took a long time to kind of go through that process. He was sick for a very long time. So I really wanted to just do the business by myself. And my philosophy with my family was it's going to be T-shirt, boardies, no shoes. we're going to have a family, and I'm going to be at home with my wife and the kids and the rest of it. And basically, that's how Hello Haus was born. I wanted to do that analysis and negotiation on my time when it suited me, and I'd have enough business organically from my existing database and clients over a long career as a real estate agent, and it grew from there. Yeah.
Was it hard to like do the flip from going from sales agent to now like on the buyer side?
No, I think it's really easy for most sales agents to do that, because you go from a position where, as a selling agent, everyone's lying to you, the buyers are lying to you, the potential sellers are lying to you, and vice versa. And then all of a sudden, the buyer just trusts you to do the job for them, and they're on board right from day dot, and they're pleasant because you're on their team. It's actually a breath of fresh air. It's much easier to work on the buyer side than it is on the sales side.
Yeah, well, you're working with someone to support them through the purchasing process, right? It's not like you're trying to represent both. Not that you ever represent the buyer as a selling agent, but you still negotiating with one and helping them through the process, and what don't you say, what can you say, what's okay, what's not okay. Like you got to try and bring them both together.
Yeah, 100%. So it's much easier on the buyer side for sure.
So you were in Sydney for how long?
Well, I'm born and raised in Sydney, and I kind of went to the US after school and then did 5 years in London.
Okay.
Arrived back when I was about 25, and then I was in Sydney until I moved here when I was 38. Okay. Yeah, so I had sort of 15 years really at, 13, 14 years it ended up being in Sydney in real estate in the eastern suburbs at Bell. Yeah.
And did you start Hello Haus while you're still in Sydney or after you moved here?
No, when we moved up here. Yeah.
Were you buying just up here or were you buying across the country?
No, across the country.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So the whole like obviously you would have built your list and like all the people locally in Sydney. And it wasn't as hard like to set up shop here with people that were still in Sydney because you were buying everywhere, right?
I think I've got a lot of trust within my circle. So because I've done a lot of family and friends over the years and helped them buy and sell property, even if it was unpaid, I've got a really big list of people that kind of trust me and understand that, I've got an expertise in a certain part of that industry. So when people are buying and selling, often they'll reach out to me, and friends of friends will do the same as well. So it was reasonably easy to kind of just let everyone know that this is what I was doing, and then that started organically. And it was obviously very small, but it was okay being small because I was working from the lounge room. I was only working when there was business there. I was flipping houses and building waterfront houses up here on the Gold Coast on the side. And I had the business in Japan as well at that point too. So I was pretty happy just doing it as a side project, and really until COVID happened. And then I got a knock on my door from CBRE through a friend of a friend, and they basically asked me to come up to Brisbane from the Gold Coast and work on a project off plan to sell 189 apartments at Wollongabba, and basically said to me, look, if you come up, we've got an entire showroom. It's a brand new designer showroom here that's air conditioned. You'll be the only salesperson that works on this project. We'll give you a computer, or you'll get all the leads directly in your inbox. All you got to do is close those leads. We only need you 3 days a week. You can do 2 hours a day of that time. And if you drive up from an hour from the Gold Coast, you can just park here all day and you're done on site, and you can build your Hello Haus business the entire time while you're here. So I took that as like, okay, well, I'm going to get away from the family and the noisy house. I'll do these deals for CBRE, and I just sat there and I built Hello Haus. So really, it started kicking off in kind of 2021.
Okay.
As I started to focus on it, because I realized I had, for lack of a better term, a tiger by the tail. There was an opportunity there that I could see that people really resonated with the service. I needed to fine tune what I was doing. I needed to get the pricing right, which was just off at the start. And then needed the skills, and I had to go down that rabbit hole then of learning how to scale a business and, focusing on marketing and doing different things like that as well.
Wearing all the different hats.
Yeah, totally. Changing the printer cartridge and closing deals.
Have you hadn't started a business before that?
I did. I started 3 separate Bell property franchises.
Okay.
Yeah, in Sydney, in the eastern suburbs, the first 3.
Okay.
But it's very different because when you're going into a franchise like that, it's basically turnkey. And Bell Property did a phenomenal job that you'd turn up and you turn your computer on and they'd have everything designed for you. Obviously, the website's built, all of the marketing's done. You just got to pay your franchise fees and then do what you do best, which is, list and sell. So that's about as easy as it gets in terms of opening a new business. You still got the same challenges of recruitment and all the hard work that goes into blood, sweat and tears of building your own business. but it's a business in a box.
But I'm
Hello
sure
Haus was reinventing it was creating a business and a niche that had never existed in Australia.
From scratch.
Yeah, from scratch.
And I'm sure the franchise had all the like systems and processes and everything else like that built into that. You already had it. Like if you had a marketing problem or if you had a sales problem, this is like how they address it or how they deal with it. Where when you're building something from scratch, like you've got nothing to work with, you're kind of just going off.
Yeah, you turn up with a manual. Yeah, and not only that, a manual and then management to tell you, to pick apart the manual and tell you to go to page 7 or go to page 73 or whatever it might be to solve that problem. Yeah, Hello Haus was different. And I was very happy for it to be a one-man band until I got to that point where I realised that there's almost blue sky here, or blue ocean, if you like, in terms of the ability to scale this if I got it right. So that was exciting, that moment. And then I really got into, passionately into building Hello Haus.
So you mentioned there was something off about the pricing. What was kind of the original pricing model?
Well, going back to when I was an agent, when I watched what was happening with the buyers agents that were representing them, I felt that the negotiation aspect was really crucial to it. So I need to be able to quantify how I could add value to the person through negotiation. So I thought, I'm going to live and die by the sword. I'll make it Australia's only no win, no fee service. And I did. I launched it and I got great PR at the start. It was picked up by multiple national newspapers and TV, and I built the business around that. And it was great. Like I could prove to people that, you set me a target price here after I analyse the property, and I'll take a percentage of the savings that I make you below the target price you set. Only problem with that, as I got sort of 9 months to a year into it, I'm promoting all the savings that I make, and then everyone new that comes in just lowers their target price because they don't want to pay any money. So all I was attracting was bottom feeders who didn't want to pay when I was getting general public leads other than people that knew and trusted me. So I had to change that model.
How did you change it?
I slowly integrated a retainer. So there was a base, started at $1,500 plus 15% of the savings.
Okay.
By the time we kind of merged the business, I'm sure, which we'll talk about in a minute, that got to $4,000 plus 15%. Okay. So it ended up being an average fee of about $8,500. Okay. But still, it was very difficult to explain to people that didn't have knowledge of how the market worked and were really emotional at that point. It was very difficult to explain to them that we were there fighting for them to save money, and we were only getting 15 cents in the dollar of anything we saved. People couldn't help themselves but shoot themselves in the foot by putting a lower target price because they just didn't want to pay any more money. So we had to really simplify that, and we just ended up going to a fixed fee model, which then the business tripled in the first 12 months after we did that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
How did you have that? Like, was there an awkward conversation with each client to be like, oh, you've come at a price of X, but we think it's actually worth Y? And then you're trying to do the saving. Like, I can imagine how that would be quite an awkward conversation, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I had to be crystal clear and really transparent with everybody. And that's what the business model is. It's all about transparency. So I would show all of my inner workings as to why the data suggests that it's worth X amount of dollars. And then if you set it at Y, there's a high chance you're going to make my jobs that difficult that you miss the property that you want to buy. So it's counterproductive. So a lot of the clients absolutely got it and set me realistic target prices, and I saved them substantial amounts of money, or maybe not. Might have bought it right at their target price, whatever it might have been. But the service worked really well with those clients that got it. It's just the people that didn't know, like, or trust me that came in, cold, that had seen some other results, and they were like, yeah, this is just, weighted in your favor. You're just going to give me this overinflated data, and then I'm going to set this target price, and you're going to make a lot of money at the back end, which wasn't the case, but it was impossible to convince those people otherwise. So it made my job harder.
Now you just had a fixed fee?
Fixed fee, and we've pushed that up over the last 14 months 4 times. Oh. I don't think we've still hit a price ceiling there. We're not getting any pushback on that, which is good. So we're just gently moving that forward as we get better at telling the story about what we do and the value that we add.
Yeah, but also you're updating your processes, your team's getting bigger, you merge, like there's a whole bunch of things. If you were to start again, would you just do a fixed fee?
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Good learnings.
And I think the biggest mistake I made is having been out of the industry as a real estate agent for some time, I came back into it probably with a little bit of self-doubt that I didn't have the confidence to say I'm worth X. And I think if I started off with that, I would have got there faster. Yeah, so it was a self-doubt thing, I think, where I just priced myself, and the way I probably sugarcoated it to my own, to myself was that I'm proving that I can add value through the no win, no fee. But really, that was just, I should have been braver and just went harder at it and put a price on it, because it was absolutely worth every cent of what we charge now.
Yeah.
And, we've got an enormous, back catalogue of huge savings that we've made for customers over the years, which is great.
So it's an element of imposter syndrome coming into play.
100%.
I don't this is a new kind of game. I've come from a different space and
Yeah.
still in property, but you don't know what you're really offering. And if you don't have the confidence of what your price point's at, then it's hard to convince others, right?
Yeah, and you get the usual thing as well that any startup founder has, which is you get torn down by other people in the industry, and that was the other thing as well. So I don't think I've got a particularly big ego, but I've probably, I do get a bit nervous, or I used to in the industry as well. Like, you're playing with the big boys in the eastern suburbs or at the top end of kind of like Bell Property, which is a premium brand in Australia, and we had a really successful office there. And when people are telling you that's not going to work, that's a terrible idea, there's no way you can add that value, and then people that you're outside of the industry are saying that to you as well. You take a lot of hits, right? You take a lot of body shots.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of self-doubt there as well, that I could deliver what I was going to do, and that's, I think, why it kept me on that proviso of making it no win, no fee, because I'm like, I'm going to prove everybody wrong here, and no one can argue with it once I show them that I can save money with that model. But still, it was wrong. Long term, it was wrong.
It's funny, we're in the same industry, so I kind of know how that all works, but it's good that it put a fire in your belly as well, because you're kind of like, oh, well, I'll show them, and you've obviously done really well from it. But it is a shame, because I remember coming into the space and there's all these kind of accreditations and certain things that people look up to within the industry, and me coming in as a young kid, I was kind of like, oh, well, I'll go get all these accreditations, and then hopefully I'll get some respect from the industry leaders or whatever it is, and it's just like, you still don't get any. It's just kind of like, oh, you're still a young kid coming in the space. You don't have any skills or knowledge. And it's like, well, why would I spend all the time getting all these skills? It's tough. Cool. So from 2018, you were still kind of half in, half out. Like, you were working with this other company and then doing it on the side. And then 2021, you went full in.
Yeah, I think really committed to it once I had a chance to actually spend some time sitting there focused on it, which is when I got out of the house, really, and worked at CBRE. And then I realised I've still got the sales skills. Like, I was knocking over these off-the-plan sales reasonably easy, and thought, okay, well, the fire is in the belly there. Like, I'm back doing deals. I'm doing lots of deals a month. And then I was watching Hello Haus build up quickly at the same time, which was really exciting, as I went from doing just a handful of deals a month to then possibly I was doing like 4 or 6 deals a month when I was at CBRE, and I was like, there's actually a business here. I actually need to stop doing the CBRE thing, as much as it's a sugar hit and it's paying the bills. I need to go off and chase this, and I kind of stopped and went off and started doubling down on what the business plan was.
Yeah, I think it's great once you've proved the model and you can see that it works, and you know that, well, if I'm allocating 10 hours a week to this and can get 4 clients or whatever it was, if I go all in, I wonder where I could take it.
Totally.
So 2021, the business is up and running. You've gone in full time. You've also got a lodge over in Japan, which I'm very excited to go visit at some point in time.
Yeah, February 25. Let's do it.
Your now business partner, Drew, also has a lodge over there. And had you met him previously in the years beforehand, or were you meeting him when you were starting to build out Hello Haus? Like, how did you guys meet?
It was pretty random, actually. Obviously, the fact that we met in a tiny ski village in the middle of Nagano in Japan, on the other side of the world. He's from Manly in Sydney as well. And Drew and I were very, friendly towards each other, as all the sort of, Western owners were in this ski village, because we were all learning, we're all in this new environment. But we never really connected in terms of, we didn't spend any real time. I didn't know him really at all. But he got a sense of what I was doing, and he's got a completely different skill set to mine, which complements us, and why I think we make a good team. And randomly he sort of had a whole heap of different business ideas that were kind of aligned with what I was doing, like in terms of the flipping the houses up here. He came from a big construction background in Sydney, where he had a big business in the 90s. He then had a mortgage origination business that was really successful up until the GFC. So he had, some industry experience from that side of it too. He was very interested though in flipping the houses, and he was very interested in sort of an Airbnb style business that he wanted to build. So he randomly moved the family to the Gold Coast without really saying anything to me at all, and was like, "Yep, I'm here in a month's time or 2 months' time," and brought his son at that point, had just started university in Sydney, came up with his wife and his daughter. His daughter was starting year 11. big move for them, like in the two, last years of her school, and moved around the corner from me and sort of said, yeah, I'm here. And then caught up a few times together and realized that, he had the skill set to complement, as I say, what we were doing, and was really interested in the Hello Haus business and thought he could add a huge amount of value. So we just started from there. And at first he said, I can give half of my working day to this project, and I'll just do that as a trial for 1 month. I'm doing this other business in the US, which takes me till up about midday. Beyond that, I'll work on Hello Haus to see if I can add some value. And then I said, yep, agreed. And that was like a Tuesday afternoon. And then Tuesday night, he rang me and said, I've just quit in the US. I'm starting tomorrow full-time on Hello Haus. So he never did a half day. He just started straight away working full-time on the business. And I was like, okay, great. So, yeah, I don't know if it's getting a little bit fast forward from there, but we basically put a deal in place that said, well, if you can add value in this way in terms of, drive the business revenue to here to make it worthwhile, then I'm prepared to give up half of the business, because I don't have the ability to take it really from where it is now to that next big growth stage. I need some more people around me that have got different skill sets. He was up for that challenge, and then that's what effectively led to the merger, within 18 months with Listing Loop.
When he said that, were you worried about like cash flows or payments or salaries or
Oh,
anything
100%.
else like that?
Yeah.
And so what year was this?
Sort of been 2022.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you kind
early
of like
2022. I
have
think.
gone out full time by yourself.
Yeah.
We're working away at it, talking to Drew. He's come over here and like you put the deal together.
Yeah.
How was that whole process of like giving up half of your business? Like for me, that seemed like a pretty daunting thing to do. But were you really confident with Drew's ability and what he was going to offer and what it was going to look like for the business moving forward?
Yeah, because he came forward straight away and identified a whole heap of different things that I hadn't been thinking about. So like, I had started working at a very small level with external mortgage brokers. I had started writing down different sort of parts of my skill set and the rest of it with content-wise. But he came in with a very direct strategy in terms of the content, creating the Get Buy Ready course to get all the experience out of my head, 30 years worth of that written down in a course structure. He then built out an entire channel of dealing with external mortgage brokers and had like a national strategy for that. There was a whole heap of different things that just took it to a whole different level. So for me, I realized I didn't have the time or really the skill set to go and do all of those extra things. He was able to sit there in the war room with a whiteboard and just map the whole thing out really quickly. And then gave me the ability to kind of focus on the things that I need to do best, and he could build out the rest of it.
That's
so it was just, I think it was worth it for me because I'd got it to a certain level, but I really felt that it needed someone else's skill set to take it further.
To take it off.
Yeah.
What was the because I've done something before where I've brought someone on board and like you negotiating an equity piece or like a portion of income or something like that. And I remember like pre-signing the agreement, you have all this anticipation of like, is this going to work out? Is it the right decision? Am I doing the right thing? I'm giving up a percentage of business? Like all these kind of thoughts come beforehand. Then you sign the agreement and then, you're kind of at this limbo stage of straight after is like, is this going to work? But obviously, you guys have been really successful after that. Talk me through like those different stages. At what point were you like, were you really happy with the deal and the outcome and what you negotiated, or like what were the different phases that you went through with the deal?
I think there's always uncertainty with that, right? Because I didn't know enough about his background. I was still learning about who he was, who their family was, the time frame that they thought they could do all these things, or he could do all these things and bring change around the business as well. So it was definitely a learning curve, and it was probably a leap of of good faith in my regard there. But it was a lot of it was born out of my experience as a real estate agent. I had got to a point where I was effectively working 6 days a week, every week, without fail, in a suit, and responsible to be on the phone 7 days a week, where the phone just didn't stop. And for my wife, she was like, well, that's exactly what you didn't want, which is why you got out of it. You've then spent 3.5 years building your baby Hello Haus, and now you're working 7 days a week, and you're solely responsible on the phone whenever people call, and you can't get off the phone. So it really, I kind of was reasonably broken again at that point, because I'm like, I know where this is going. Unless I scale it and do this, it's just not going to work. I'm either going to sell the business, I'm going to scale it back so I can control my hours, or I'm going to like back this horse and get on with it. So it was a leap of faith, but it was just absolutely just going to get on with it. And there's definitely a teething period. Like we went through, like I would say that if Drew and I are honest, the 12 to 18 months that precedes that, we didn't hit the goals or the targets that we wanted to, which is why we merged with Listing Loop. We realized we had the tiger by the tail, but we didn't have probably the budget to go and spend on all the things that we wanted to. We hadn't quite got it right from a marketing perspective, and that's why the opportunity for the Listing Alert merger came about, which was the right thing to do. And Drew was able to bridge that process and bring those two groups together and manage that merger better than possibly I could have. I was heavily involved, and I was involved at the start of that process and along the whole way, but Drew was really in the nuts and bolts of it from like a legal perspective and how all the numbers were going to work, and that was enough for me to then just go and focus on the business, which was doing the business day to day. Probably the most interesting thing that happened with Drew and I was before this point. So before Drew moved to Queensland was I'd say a pivotal time in my life. So I was working by myself at Hello Haus, and I'd done Michael Griffiths' networking training for about a year. So I had a coach there, and I was growing my LinkedIn and going out and networking and doing different things, which was great. And the business was building quickly doing that, and doing media training and other things. And when I had a client that I had never met, just came through a referral channel, and I had done 4 transactions with this client. So I'd done agent selection and offloaded 4 properties, and then I helped them buy a property. So I did a 5th transaction, and I got on really well with this guy down in Melbourne. Never met him before, didn't know who he was from Borough Soap. And he was talking to me, and I got into the weeds a little bit because he was really interested in my journey and where I was at in the process, and really liked the business. And I was staring at my desk, and I had a stack of books that I got from Michael's training, where Michael would give you a book every time you go every quarter, and other things that I had bought, business books. I had a whole heap of them that I were halfway through or hadn't started. I'm sitting there, and the guy's name's Peter Cook, and he's telling me his story, and I said, "Oh, you've written a few books. You wouldn't have written this book, would you? Because I've got a book right in front of me by Peter Cook." He goes, "Yep, I wrote that book." I'm like, "Oh my God, this is just small world." So then we get right into the weeds about what he does and the rest of it. And he said, "Look, I've paid you for everything we've done, and I'm really happy with your service, but my wife and I want to gift you like a mentoring session. I want you to come down to Warrandyte to my family home and stay with my daughters and my wife for 2 days. And we're going to bushwalk, and we're going to talk about all things you and get right into your head." And I'm like, "This is amazing. This is great." So, he charges $5,000 for half a day or whatever, and he's gifted me this to come down for 2 days. I thought that was incredibly generous, and he's just a lovely guy. Turns out he's a trained monk. He's a meditation expert. He's got an amazing startup business in the accounting space. He's written 6 or so books, incredibly successful business person in Australia, and just super lovely, him and his wife Trish. And I go down there, and I was right at a point where I was kind of at that stage where I said to you, I'm working 7 days a week again. I'm burnt out. I don't know what to do. Scale it back, sell it, leave altogether. And I go down and talk to him for 2 days. And all we do is bushwalk with kangaroos and things around the river there. And then we sit down. He doesn't really say much. He just lets you talk and lead the conversation. And then at the end of the second day, he gets a pen and paper out, sitting at his dining table, and basically says, "Well, the only thing that lights you up is scaling the business. So that's what you're going to do." I'm like, wow, okay. And it's like, okay, you look back at it, and then he broke it all down, and I'm like, absolutely. So within 4 to 6 weeks of that, I had Drew move here, signed him up as the CEO and business partner, and then scaling started instantly from there. So it all happened within about 6 weeks.
And if that's not a sign, then nothing else
Totally.
is.
It was a bizarre life experience for me to go through that process.
Isn't it amazing that you can spend all that time together, and he's just, watching you and analysing you and thinking about things, and you think you're just there hopping around with kangaroos and having a bit of a bushwalk, and he goes, this is the one thing.
I've had it twice in my life, and it's a really good life learning experience for me. That was the second time. The first time when I went through a relationship breakdown with my previous long-term girlfriend before I got married. And I was really unhappy for a long period, and I ended up staying there for 5 and a bit years. And probably for the last 2.5 years, I was trying to find a way to get out of that relationship, but it was messy. I won't go into the details of it why, but I needed to kind of wind that down gently. And no one did anything wrong. It was never going to be long term. She possibly wanted it to be, but I didn't. And I was really struggling to make the decision to get out of there. And I went and saw my doctor, and I was just talking to him about general stuff and saying, I'm a bit stressed about this. And he basically said, he listened to the story for about 5 minutes and said, "Go home right now and rip the Band-Aid off and break up with her." That was it, like one sentence. And I went home, ripped the Band-Aid off and broke up with her, and it changed my life. And I was like, why had I put that off for 2.5 years? And then Peter did exactly the same thing. You're going to scale this business. And it's like, it's just sometimes for me, it's taken those external voices to say, this is what you're going to do. Go and do it. And I needed those pushes both those times, which really had big impact on me.
I think that's a massive thing, because I think for anyone that's listening, if there's something in the back of your head that you've been telling yourself for the last 2 or 3 years, or there's a business you want to start, or there's something that you want to do, or if something doesn't feel right, or if there's something off, I think subconsciously we like tell ourselves these things, but we're so comfortable and complacent with where we are. It's just too hard to like make a decision
100%.
or like change anything. And so 100% rip the Band-Aid off. Like,
Yeah.
if you feel like it's going to change and you've been thinking about it for that long, then you may as well do it now, because you're just going to be sitting around for another 3-5 years doing the same thing.
Yeah, totally. And I think this is something that I've directly applied now to business in this business that I hadn't done previously. And it's along the lines of, I've got this idea, do it. Yep. I'm going to start writing content, dick around for a little while, haven't started it, and I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to train my brain to do it every day, and I'm going to stay consistent. I'm going to do it, and I'll turn that into a book, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do the, you know, now it's just a case of like, I don't need that external push. I've got that fire within me that kind of backs myself to go and do those things, which is good. That's a big thing to learn, but it took me probably, 15 years of work or whatever to get to that point. I don't know if it's a confidence thing or, a self-confidence thing or whatever it was. But those external pushes have been, I think 2 pivotal points in my life.
So you originally, with the terms withdrew, you set these targets that you wanted to hit. And I think that would have been kind of a good backboard for you just to go like, okay, well, if you hit these targets, then you're going to get 50% of the business or achieve X, Y, and Z. Yep. That would have made you feel good after you signed the agreement, but then you mentioned like 18 months after you hadn't have hit them yet.
Yep.
Was there like, were you frustrated? Were you like, what do we do? Like, how did that whole, off the back of not hitting those targets, is that where the whole concept of potentially merging with Listing Loop came into play?
The Listing Loop one was random because I think we had a marketing problem, right, at Hello Haus. Like we hadn't really conceived the right idea of how to position it and then how to get that out to the marketplace. We hadn't done a good enough job of that. So we were growing and we were organically growing at a decent pace. We just weren't hitting the sort of big numbers that we were hoping to hit in that short time frame that we'd set those ambitious targets. And then out of the blue, I had our little guy start at kindy. And I met one of the kindy dads, and he's in a startup business in a completely different industry. He's in sort of sports industry. And we got on well. We both had little boys together that were good mates. And about 6 weeks into that, or less, probably 4 weeks into that, we had a bit of a conversation around what we do. And he said to me, actually, I'm going to connect you up with a guy that I know in Melbourne who I sort of talk to every couple of months about business. We did a course together a few years ago. He's a really good guy, and he's founded a business in that kind of property space. And I think he'd be interested to chat to you. I was like, okay, great. And then he said, well, I said to him, what can I do to help you? And he goes, well, I need to raise $1 million for this startup idea that I'm at and in the sports space. And I'm like, okay, great. I've got 2 or 3 people that are high profile, ex-athletes that I could put you in contact with, and potentially we could do a deal. So, fast forward 6 months, his contact acquired my business. My contact put $1 million into his startup from that one conversation. And this is where networking is just amazing, right? Like, and just having those conversations and being out there.
Especially at kindy too.
Yeah. So it's crazy. And that was just a coffee at kindy or whatever. And then it goes from there. So that was really good. And then, Listing Loop reached out to me in February last year. Okay. And they started that conversation. I think really where they'd got to is they had built a fantastic marketplace. So they built an ecosystem to support the buyer journey, and they've done a fantastic job of doing that. So they're attracting, at the moment they've got about 200,000 subscribers. They get about 4,000 to 5,000 subscribers a month that come along, which is phenomenal. But they had a hole really in the process where if they could find off-market listings, or people could go and find their own off-market listings at that point through the marketplace, they still had to deal with real estate agents, and they still had the same set of challenges with analysis, due diligence, and negotiation. So they wanted to solve that problem so that they could close that loop on the ecosystem for the buyer journey. And they had unlimited leads, but they just didn't have the ability to sort of monetize those leads and service it. So they saw Hello Haus as a good example. We had exactly the opposite problem where we could fulfill all day and we could scale to meet that fulfillment. We just didn't have the deal flow. And I openly said that to Rhett on the first call, who's the founder of Listing Loop, and that resonated with him. And it started from there. The conversations were really easy. took 6 months. We did the deal in August, the start of August 2023. Okay. And then, we had a short period to bed in those two businesses together, and then we tripled the business in the first 12 months. Tripled the Hello Haus business and doubled the Listing Loop business. Yep.
How was the whole negotiation process over the 6 months? Was there back and forths? Was there like terms that you both wanted to get in or didn't want to take out? Like, was there any conflict, or was it pretty smooth?
I mean, I've done this a few times by selling my franchises at Bell, so I've been through that process a couple of times, and it's always nerve-wracking. There's always pushback on both sides. So I had a bit of experience, had a bit of a thick skin with that stuff. However, we did get to a point a couple of times, or one in particular, where we thought this is a dead deal. It's not going to go any further than that. There was a personality clash at one point, not with Rhett and I or Drew involved either, but someone else within that business, which was all smoothed over and we're all fine now. But I think we all wanted the same thing. It was just different language that took a little while to gel and to get onto the same page. We had gone and sought a business valuation external to that ourselves, so we had a fair idea of what we were looking at in terms of the value of our business. One of the bigger drivers, though, for me was it was always going to be, valued at a service-based multiple. It was always going to have a key man issue with me. Effectively, my name was on the door and everything went through me. So it was really difficult to get a high valuation for a service business like that. And a lot of buyers agents are going to find that, or are finding that now that I'm speaking to in the industry as well, that if it's just them, or if it's, their name on the door and there's 6 or 10 people behind you, you're still going to struggle to sell it to somebody else, unless you've got something else there in terms of proprietary tech or something else going on, partnerships that can grow that business and there'd be value for a future buyer. So that was appealing for me. Because whatever we sold it to for Listing Loop, they had really the power of getting valued at 8x or more as a marketplace. So that was the ability to turbocharge the back end. It also got rid of the key man issue. So it was a good fit from that perspective. Plus they had the ability to put fuel on the fire and grow it faster than we ever could. So I felt like it was a natural fit from that perspective. And they're a nice family-owned business with the same moral compass as us.
Yeah, it feels like, you spent 4 or 5 years building the base of the Ferrari car. You just hadn't put the engine in, and then as soon as you got merged with Listing Loop, you've finally put the engine in, and now you can take off. You kind of needed to have the foundation of everything that you'd built and all the processes and bringing Drew on board and all those sorts of things before you could really take off. It's been really cool watching you grow the business over the last little while. And we get to catch up every now and then, and I get to hear all the things that are happening and the lead flow that's coming through, and seeing your team grow. How has that whole process of I don't think it was just you and Drew. It would have been at one point, but I think you had 1 or 2 other staff when they came on board. But now it's just you're constantly hiring or firing, it's finding something or need more for the business. How has finally putting that engine into the car and now you're taking off? Have you found your role's changing completely? Are you more focused on growing the business? I know that you get to sit on the board with everyone and have those bigger conversations around the entire ecosystem of Listing Loop. How has that completely changed from just being on the phone 7 days a week?
Yeah, well, I haven't had too much to do with the board, but I've got a direct route with Rhett, the founder of the business, where we can share our ideas and be heard, which is great. So we work really closely with those guys and with the CTO, Andy, as well, who goes and builds that out with his whole tech team. So that was the other appeal as well. We've got a management team, we've got a marketing team. There's a lot of people there that can take these ideas that I had and actually bring them to real life. And one of those is our AI-powered house finder tool, which we'd been doing manually. Within months, Andy and the team had built that out into a product that we could go and take to the open market if we wanted to, but we've kept it in-house at the moment for part of our team. So that's been huge for us. My role has changed a lot. I guess the biggest challenge for me when we did that merge was, this business is a lot to do with Scott. Your fingerprints are all over the deals. The clients are coming to you. You're at the coalface of all the original phone calls or the origination of all the leads and where they go from there. Can it be done without him? And I had, again, a lot of negative feedback of people saying to me, it's worthless. It's just unless you can get other people to negotiate like you can at a top level, it's never going to work. And it's no, I'm really confident that there's a lot of people in the industry that are unhappy. There's a lot of or current agents that have got really successful careers that don't like the job. I get told it all day, and I did when I was a real estate agent as well. When I tell agents now what I do, and they go, oh my God, you're living the dream. Yeah. You get to negotiate all day, you are living the dream, right? So, and I know that so firsthand from dealing with agents and being one, that there was never going to be a problem recruiting out of that industry. There's heaps of people that want to leave. People are sick of working 6 days, sick of being in a suit, sick of having a clean car the whole time, sick of being, at open for inspections and responsible to be on the phone 7 days a week. So to go off and do that role would be good. So that gave me the confidence that we could build a team. I had Sammy Powell, our mutual mate, that you used to work with as well, come on board, which was an amazing addition to the team. Much loved member of sort of the OG Hello Haus, and Sammy brought another complete different skill set to the table, which really allowed us to focus on investors, and then also just his vision for how things should be done as well. And again, he's got the same moral compass as Drew and I, which is incredibly important. And he's really connected with the team as we've grown as well. So there's 3 people that, from a cultural perspective, that are leaders within the business. And then we've got other people that are really experienced. The challenge, I guess, once we did the merger was then how to build out a team that can scale. And then to your point, how did my job change day to day? So because they had such a massive amount of leads that they could give us, and because we needed to understand how to close those leads and to bridge that gap between the two businesses, I really was on the coal face of that, which has been hard. That's probably been the biggest negative for me in the 12 months since the merger. You know it. You've seen my diary. Very likely I'm on between 6 to 10 booked new business calls a day, every day, which means growing the business and working, on the business is really difficult because I'm knee deep in the business all day. That's just changed. So Monday this week, October 1st, is my cutoff date. Nice. I'm effectively off the phones from that, and I've wound down that over the last 6 weeks, and already that's changed drastically. Like I can, one day last week I had 3 less calls. I produced 7 videos for content creation. I can write a week's worth of my LinkedIn daily blogs in 2 hours if I've got the time to do it and the headspace to do it. So already I can see that there'll be a giant uplift in content. It allows me then to manage my team effectively. Probably the biggest challenge that we've got is now that we're scaling, we probably need to change the way that we do business in the back end. So I've got to reset how we do things and streamline that. So I've got another complete model that I've built out and whiteboarded out into detail about how we'll set that up. And now's the time where I actually go and implement that and deliver on it, which is exciting because then we've got a solid foundation to scale from here.
You just got more time to think, and I think that's important. Like
100%.
Not only for content and all the stuff that you do, but just how we're going to grow the team, how we're going to increase the business, how we're going to increase our processes. I think that's so important to have that time as the founder.
You see it as well, like with you talk about other people that are leaders in this industry, like, mutual friends, Sammy Gordon, Arjun, Ben Handler. They're all the face of their business in terms of that. And that's really what we haven't done very well. And I think that's great that there's other people in the industry that have been trailblazers that have done a great job on the content creation and being the front of their business. And I really need to have the time to be able to go and do that. I just haven't been able to take that reign. So that's exciting, the next stage now.
That'd be great. And I think a lot of people struggle with that as well. Like I think it's great to have a face of the business, but then some people get to a point where their business is like solely based on them, and then they're trying to undo being the face of the business as well. But I think when you're in specifically our industry, and it is all reliant on like one individual person and what their purpose and vision is, like it kind of does have to be based on that one individual and build it out that way. Yeah.
We've got a different take on it, I guess, though. We come from a slightly different angle in terms of the leads at the moment. 70% of them are coming in from they don't know who we are, what we do, what problem we solve. True. Which is good because they're not relying on Scott Aggett or anyone else in the business. They're coming in from a different angle. 30% of the business currently is still from organic growth from Hello Haus, and that will get watered down less and less and less over the this growth stage. Yep. So that makes my job to not be that sole point of focus a little bit easier, which is good, I think, long term.
So I have seen your calendar, and every time I have to organise a coffee with you, it's like between strictly like
6 a.m. usually,
6:30 a.m. and 7:15, and then you're walking off on a phone call. But I think we've had a discussion about this before. The reason you consistently did that is obviously you want to control the process, but you had a much higher conversion rate than anyone else who was on the phones.
Yep.
And I think as part of any sort of founder who may be wearing multiple hats, there's a point in their business where you kind of you do have to start to let go of some things.
Yep.
Has that been a harder process for you, and how have you tackled finding the right people to then take over that hat for you?
It's been the biggest challenge for the last 12 months, and it's been something I was super conscious of from day one. Like for the first 3 months, I wasn't on the phone deliberately. I didn't want to do that role. And then sort of for the year that's preceded that, I've basically been, balls deep, for lack of a better term, on the phone the whole time. So yes, definitely conscious of it, and but it just worked out that had to be how, as we built the team around it, that they needed my feedback, they needed my training, they needed my recorded calls, they needed my content around things to tweak and the rest of it to get that right, and then build a team around that. And that's part of being in a startup. They're still really in that startup mode as well, that we just, both sides of the business just weren't in that financial position where they could just go throw tons of money at it and replace me with heaps of other people, and we just had to grow through it and get it to a position where we had enough income there that we were all, going in the right direction and grow the business. So thankfully that we're at that point now. So, we've got 2.5 full-time phone salespeople on our end of the business. And then, we've got the rest of the team now. I've got 6 negotiators, experienced negotiators that work underneath me. I'm not really doing a huge amount of negotiation. I probably work on 3 or 4 transactions a month. And that suits me fine because I get enough of my content ideas and enough to train my team. The rest of it, I'm staying right at the coalface, but I'm not bogged down with that workload, which is good.
So tripling the business in, how long's it been now? 18
We're 14 months in, and we tripled it in the first 12 months.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Was there like mechanical pieces that were falling off as you were scaling that
Yeah.
fast?
Yeah. I mean, it was a lot of hard work in that time frame, but we realized as well, we haven't hit that pushback on price. We haven't hit the price ceiling. We haven't got the marketing right still. We haven't, attracted our ideal customer yet. I don't think we've got that narrowed down well enough either. So that's really exciting because these are all things that we can work towards where this business is going to go to the moon. And we're really pumped for it, but it just takes time. And when you're dealing with the marketplace as well, there's 5,000 people come through, but they're all at different stages of the journey. They're all looking for different types of properties at different price points. They're right across the country. Some, as opposed to, we were pretty dialed in on who our ideal customer was at Hello Haus originally, which was owner-occupiers trading up and trading down. At that point, when I merged the business, the average transaction was 1.6 million. The average transaction now is 950,000. And a lot of that's to do is with investors. The investors are spending less, but also the average customer that comes out of the marketplace is at a lower price point. Not a bad thing. It's just we've had to adjust to all these things about how we sell to these people because it's a different mindset. They possibly don't have the pain point that owner-occupiers trading up, trading down do have because they've been through the process before. So there's just lots to learn about. A lot to take on board and then have all those different digital flows built out and responses so that you can talk in the language these people want to hear.
And there's a change in clientele. You got to change all your process to suit, right? Yeah. So you kind of been through 2 mergers. Like obviously you brought Jure on board for 50%, and then you've done the merger with Listing Loop. How have you felt through that process in terms of like, again, giving up your baby type of thing, where it's like you spent so long building this thing and then like you've done the hard yards yourself and then you brought someone else on board and then given someone else a percentage? Like, are you excited about that because of the potential of the greater ecosystem of Listing Loop, or has there been an element of like, am I giving up my baby again?
There's a balance of both those things. It does come with its frustrations when you've got other people that are pulling the strings, and you don't necessarily agree on some things, or you might not wholeheartedly be bought in on whatever process it might be or direction it goes in on. But the bigger picture is for me that I've not got a big enough ego or that I can back the vision of why we did this originally, that they've got the skills that I don't have, that can take this to a much bigger business than I had. So I'm quite happy to kind of sit back in some ways and just focus on what I'm good at and enjoy that process as well. That's been the difficult part for the last 12 months, is I haven't been able to do that I love in terms of I haven't been negotiating, I haven't been spending enough time, in the negotiation weeds and really adding value on that front. So I've been doing it, but not enough to kind of scratch my itch. So that's going to be the exciting part, that I've now got other people that are building out all these other parts of the business and I can focus on what I do that I really enjoy. And the other thing that comes up, which we were speaking of before we went on air, is that, like you, I've got a reasonable amount of other business ideas that I've got that are around the core product that we do or around the industry. And that's exciting to be able to have that kind of space or fresh air to go, okay, there's actually other things that we can develop around this, and possibly they'll become tools of Listing Loop, or it might be something that I do by myself or with somebody else later at another stage. But it's exciting to be able to have those opportunities and be able to think about those things too.
Yeah,
Yeah. And only by being in that merger have I had the space to be able to take on those other thoughts.
Yeah, well, if you're still on the phone all day, you wouldn't have the time to stop and think.
Yeah.
So you did mention that you got the AI tech in house. Is that a Listing Loop thing or is it a Hello Haus thing?
Well, I mean, I created it, and it's something that I've been doing manually for the 4 years before Drew and I hooked up, and then we were doing with all of our customers right through to when we did the merger with Listing Loop, and then it was one of the first things that they looked at and thought, wow, this is an amazing idea that we can build AI around this and proprietary tech, and we've done that, and it works phenomenal for us in terms of finding things pre and off market for our customers at any price range right across the country. So I actually believe that House Finder could be a standalone business and be very successful by itself. However, it's part of our weaponry that is I think gives us an advantage as a business in terms of what we do, and allows us to really niche down to this specialist model that we've got, and adds a lot of value to the client journey. So I don't think it'll come out as a public product.
I think
in the short term
that you've decided to keep it in house is a real testimony to the tech that you've built, because like if it's that valuable, that it's more valuable to keep it in house because you get so much benefit out of it rather than trying to take it to the public and sell it that way. I think it's a real testimony to what you guys do.
And if it gets saturation in the marketplace, and it does work, which I think it will, it'll diminish the value of the product as well. So it actually works at a smaller scale for us, which is good. Even though we're possibly giving up on monetizing that, but it's not going to go away. Like, we could go and do that at some point in the future. There's other ways that we're looking at the moment of integrating into the business and the marketplace in different parts of the customer journey. So yeah, there's a lot more happening with House Finder, which is exciting. And there's I've got an iPhone notes full of other, or other just little tidbits here and there that we could sort of, go and build out, or go and explore, or go and add on, or do things different in terms of the business practice that we're currently deploying. So that's exciting like that you've got that platform to be able to sit there and sit, in front of a tech person that's an expert in that space and go, actually, I think, we could do this with it. And they're like, yep, that's good, or no, that won't work for these reasons and these set of challenges. And if they like it, they've got a dev team, they can just go and build it, in-house, and it gets built really quickly, and they fine tune it, and they're split testing the whole time, and they're just iterating to get a better product out of it. So it's exciting.
I love the list of notes that you've got of things, because I've got a big list as well.
I bet yours is bigger than mine.
There's a few things on there. So one of the core things that I kind of learned early on is just focus on one thing. And I love that that's kind of what you've done with Hello Haus up until now. It's kind of been you, then Drew, then bringing everyone on board. Is there an element to you now where you feel good because you've got the team behind it, you've got the processes down packed, you've got Listing Loop backing you from a leads perspective, and you can kind of see the greater picture of everything coming together, and you have kind of focused on it as the one thing up until now, really?
Yep.
Has that now given you the confidence to go, okay, well, this baby's set in place, even though it's still my core thing and like what I'll be focusing on moving forward for Scotty? Is there going to be like an element of like 80-20 where you allocate 20% of your time to new projects, or like how do you feel like that's going to look?
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. It'd probably be dictated a little bit by Listing Loop in terms of where they see my highest and best use in the business. But I think to address the first part of that, I've never been more excited about what I built, my idea, the baby. This is the most excited I've ever been about it, because really when you look at it, we're the only business in Australia that works nationwide doing what we're doing. There's a lot of people coming into the industry. Majority of them are focused on either localized BA services, or they're doing something nationally with investors. I see a vision, and whether I'm right or wrong, this may never happen, of where we need, and I've been talking about this openly with Listing Loop, where we end up niching down to just being with owner-occupiers nationwide, and we don't play in that sandpit with all the other investors that the buyer's agents are doing. Because as you know, I go to great lengths to say I'm not a buyer's agent, and I don't want to play in that sandpit. We've got a blue ocean strategy over here where there's 1,500 transactions a day. We believe we can take a chunk of that and build an enormous business like that, and have, at the moment, not a lot of competition So I think that's really what I'm focused on at the moment. I think that's the bigger prize than trying to come up with another startup idea that might be good or might not be good. I've got to keep the blinkers on and stay focused on that because the opportunity is enormous.
Yeah.
And I need to lead that process as well and keep coming up with better ideas to fine tune what we're doing and get the most out of that.
Yeah, well, and you've freed up your time to give you the ability to just focus on it at a different level. Like, it's still been your baby, but you've been on the phone the whole time as well. So like, your one thing is now, it's still the one thing, but you've got more time to focus on different elements of that business.
Yeah.
So in terms of, and I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but you've been through like two kind of, one merger, one kind of like bringing someone on board. Obviously in that process, there's like different agreements, different terms, all that sort of stuff. You've done it with 3 Bells in the past as well.
Yep.
Is there any like really key learnings when it comes to potentially looking to bring a partner on board to an existing business or selling an existing business? Is there any kind of like real key learnings that you would take away from that? And it could just be as simple as like, just try and stay friendly with the person and like be really open with communication around the agreement or the terms that you're not happy with. Because yeah, I think for a lot of people that might be going through that process, especially if they're doing it for the first time, because you mentioned you got thick skin around it, like it's easy to get like uncomfortable with potentially giving up a percentage of your business or like making a big decision like that and what it's going to look like moving forward. Yep. Is there any like kind of mistakes or learnings that you've taken away from any of the bigger agreements that you've done?
I think there's probably a lot of learnings in each of those transactions that are different to each other. The ones that would overarch all of those transactions is pushing for what you really believe the business is worth, but also leaving a little bit of money on the table, that it's a deal that works for both sides, so that you can bring it together in a reasonable time frame. I spent a lot of money on lawyers going back and forth, arguing about things that in the grand scheme of things, probably we shouldn't have spent tens of thousands of dollars, playing ping pong on that front. So just making it more of a fair deal once you've really established where you believe the line in the sand should be. So that's one of the key things I think in each of the deals. I'd say the other thing is with the listing loop deal, we probably underestimated how many other suitors we had. That would, in retrospect, that's possibly a regret that I had in that regard. Like, I'm really happy where I am and I'm not going to look back, so there's no issues whatsoever on that front. But if you went back in time and said, okay, what really were my options? I was probably pretty blindsided by that. Okay. I didn't look far enough afield to think how many other suitors there would have been. And in retrospect, now that we've gone and scaled this business, we've had so many people kind of put their hand up to say, this is a really interesting business model and yeah, we should talk or whatever. And it's like, well, we're already done. We're dating already or we're married over here, so we can't do that. So there would have been some bigger opportunities like that. So maybe really understand what your worth is and what all the options are before you commit for doing something. And probably the biggest one, like including, my business partners at Bell, business partner in Drew when it was just Hello Haus, and then business partners with Listing Loop, is managing the contract, managing the agreement. That is something that you constantly have to do. I've been guilty of being too lax with that and just trusting people, and then probably not stepping up and making a big deal of something until it's not too late, but you're a long way past that. So I think managing that agreement is really important from both sides, to be adult about it and say, well, hang on, we did this on the proviso that you could do this, or, I was going to do that and you haven't delivered on that part. And, what's your accountability there, and what are we going to do going forward to reset those expectations?
Yeah.
Because it ends up becoming a big mountain to climb later when you don't deal with it on the run. So I think managing the agreement's a big one ongoing.
Yeah, that's important. I think a lot of people just sign the agreement and then pretend like everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And trust each other and do what it is. But, there's a reason you spent tens of thousands of dollars on a legal document, and follow it, follow the procedures, follow what you said you were going to do, and back it up and manage it. When you mentioned the suitor thing, I think that's a really good point as well, because there is a lot that you could suit with or match with. But in terms of like if you think about your mindset at when that occurred, was it because things with Drew, like you weren't hitting goals, and then Listing Loop actually approached you and like came to you with an offer? Did that kind of put you in that position where you're like, oh, this could potentially work, like let's just go and investigate that?
It's 100% what happened.
So you didn't really have, like, it's not like you were going out and looking around.
We weren't shopping around at all. We were very sort of happy to continue doing what we were doing. It's just that they came in and gave us a clear path to kind of turbo the business and exit like that through it. which we were happy to kind of do. But yeah, if we had, that's why I say at that point, if we would have actually sort of distilled what we've done and what we were sitting on, and then looked at who the obvious people were that we could have tagged up with at that point and solved the same problem, like the marketing problem or the lead flow problem, there was a lot of suitors. And it wasn't until we did that deal where we look back and go, actually, now that we just, it took that penny drop moment to go, actually, our idea, I was bang on with this. It just needed fuel on the fire.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they did it, it was like, it just resonated with all their customers, and we tripled the business, right? So, yeah, if we just had that level of confidence beforehand, but you only know what you know at the time. It's easy to say that in retrospect as well. Like, we just didn't have the capacity to throw lots of money at it. And there's a reason why we didn't have the capacity to throw lots of money at it. There was other things going on in the background. Part of it was Japan. Like, I'd put a lot of money, 7 figures in cash of my own money in Japan. COVID had hit. It was 3 years of no business, 3 years of locked out of Japan, 3 years of not even be able to, get a return on my investment or get my cash out. So I didn't have the cash to I was watching my pennies at that point rather than, if I had the money here, I would have just funded it myself. I would have just kept going and said, I'll throw $50,000 at a marketing idea here and the rest of it. But I just didn't have that capacity to do that, or I didn't want to take that risk because I had all my money tied up, or a big chunk of my money tied up abroad.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Like, I've definitely had seasons in business where something might not be going right, or there's like a potential risk within the business, and then you make these decisions at that point in time when if you were to just to zoom out and say, okay, well, this is just a 3-month issue. Like, I don't need to make a big decision based on this one thing. You'd be a bit more strategic around how you plan things, but in the moment, it's hard, right? Like, you have to make a decision.
And also, you're making me look back at it now at 14 months. Like, if we zoom out again at 24 months or whatever it might be, you might turn around and go, that was absolutely genius. Yeah, what you did 24 months ago in terms of doing that deal. And I've got the level of confidence with the business and how we're doing things at the moment that we will get through that barrier and it'll go, rocketing ahead. So, yeah, I'm excited about that process, and I don't want to look back because, what's done is done.
So obviously you've had to hire a fair few through this whole process.
Yep, we're up to 14 now.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yep.
How has that whole hiring process been for you? Has it been a learn? I mean, you've ran franchises before, so I'm sure you would have gone through the hiring journey. But any sort of like key learnings or like key people? Like you mentioned Sammy before, which we are good friends with, and he's a great hire. Like you're right. Like, you guys all match. Like, I want to hang out with you. I can see how you're all kind of got the same vision. So he would have been a great hire. But has there ever been like someone who hasn't worked out, or someone who has been really, really good, and like the hire process for you has been like, okay, we've got to make sure that we do this at every time?
We've got exactly the same team. We haven't lost anyone. Nice. So we've built and just kept going, and no staff turnover, 0. Oh, wow. So I'm really happy in terms of the cultural part of that. And it'll come at some point where people will leave and go on a different journey or a different path, whatever, which is part of the process of any business. But I think getting to the business at the age, I'm 47 now, and with the level of life experience I've had in terms of, recruiting people previously and training and where I'm at in terms of my confidence level of my own skill set and expertise in that space, I was attracting people that wanted to be on that journey with me, which has never happened before. Like at Bell, it did to a certain degree. Like, I had a bit of a name for what I sold or whatever in my area, and I'm sure that helped when I was recruiting people that wanted to work with me specifically, but not to the same level as it does now. So I've been positioned in the industry at a different level, and recruiting has actually been pretty straightforward. Like, if we wanted to go out and I have people coming to me every month now, like multiple people a month, that are looking to join the team in some sort of role, and typically it's negotiation or an analyst role, which is good. That's exciting. So you got people coming to us, and we can pick and choose, I guess, who's going to be the right fit. Now it's very much around culturally who's going to be a right fit for us as well, and it's all around the moral compass for me, because you get a lot of people that have come out of the real estate industry. They just want to do deals, but they'll do deals at any cost. We're really focused on people that care about the journey, about the customer journey, fight to save them money, give great customer service the whole way, so they hold their hand through that process. And that's really resonated with our customers, and that's worked really well. So
how do you monitor moral compass from like an initial standpoint? Is there certain questions that you ask? Is it like a personal life thing? Is it like, can you pick it up straight away? Like, what's the things that you look out for?
I think personality-wise, I can pick that up pretty quickly. I think you can do that really well as well. Like, you know, we've got mutual friends and they're friends for a reason, right? Like they're nice, genuine people and down to earth and the rest of it. And our team is all like that. They're really approachable. There's no ego. There's no aggression or anything in anything they do. They're well-spoken, well put together people. And I'm right in the weeds managing them and their deals as well. So that part of the role I still get to do. I work with their clients as well at the same time as they might do. So I get that feedback in real time. And probably the most rewarding way for me to check that this is happening is, you know, we get 5-star review after 5-star review, and it's all in the name of, you know, Tyson, Sarah, Marsha, Stephen, Colin. It's Dimitri. It's not me that's getting those 5-star reviews anymore, where it was all me up to a certain point. So you're seeing that now come back from the clients that they're really happy with it as well. So I think when you ask those first questions, really, it has to be based on a high level of experience before we'll take anyone on board. So we get a lot of people that come and say, I've been out of the game for 10 years or I've been a buyer's agent. I'm like, yeah, but you were never an expert negotiator. So unless you started from that position as an ex-real estate agent, it's very difficult to have the skill set at the level that we do, I think. So we pride ourselves on that's really, you know, one of the core pillars of our success is expert negotiation or expert analysts.
Yeah. That's what you've anchored the business on. So you want to have the best of the best.
Yep. So that works well for us.
Well done, mate. Well,
thank you.
Thanks for coming on and sharing your story.
Yeah,
it's lots of journeys. I'm really excited to watch you guys continue to take off. I hope you keep tripling every year for the next little while.
Same. That'd be nice.
But yeah, just watching the whole ecosystem of Listing Loop as well, because I know there's whole different branches and bits and pieces coming together. I love that you've kind of like doubled the Listing Loop business just from the Hello Haus component. Like, I think that's really cool.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't want to take all the credit for that. They've got a fantastic business that doubled with us on that journey as well. So they've got lots of moving parts, including a fantastic lending arm of that as well. So I'm not going to take all the credit for that.
But you can see how, like, you know, it was a win-win scenario, right? Like, you guys have done really well, they've done really well, and I think that's what you'd want out of a big deal like that anyway, right?
Yeah, they built a great ecosystem where they could clip the ticket the whole way around, if you like, from that perspective to monetize it, but also, you know, from a wholehearted, genuine perspective, they built a business that supports the buyer on that journey, which is fantastic for the end user, for the consumer. So, yeah, no, I'm definitely not taking credit for that. Rhett and his team built that marketplace before we jumped on board to, ride on their coattails and bring a different skill set to the table.
100%. Well, we'll have to get you back in another year and a half or 2 years or something, and
love it.
Hopefully you're taking over the world.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks for coming on, Scotty.
Cheers. See you, Chief.
See you, mate.